We left off with this question, why in the world are there two more stages here? Freud said everything was done and over after the fifth year. Remember that phallic stage is the fourth and the fifth year. And Freud thought that personality was all set. That would include your psychosexual development, the foundation of your sexuality. And that actually is exactly why he names this stage the latency stage. Latency meaning hidden or inactive. Okay, so the age range for this stage is 6 to 12. There is going to be no body part focus because this part of your development has now moved underground. It's inactive for a while, for a number of years, you'll see here. And this is very important because something else needs to happen before your sexuality can be something that you share with another person. Hopefully something else happens, right? Hopefully a lot else happens. But basically, you have a lot of social skills to learn. And so that's what kids are concentrating on in this latency stage, um, is learning all of those social and emotional skills that are needed to handle a relationship. I mean, relationships are pretty powerful things. And unfortunately, a lot of young adults get into relationships and still don't have the emotional stability to handle like the types of jealousy that can come up or devastation from the relationship not working out and so on. Okay, so that is why this is called the latency stage, and there's no body part focus, and there's no psychosexual task, although they're, kids are working on something. They're working on social skills and emotional skills and such. And then we get to the genital stage, and for your age range here, you can just put puberty on. Okay, and the focus now is back on the genitals, but still, we don't have fixations or things like that. That's already done and set according to Freud. But the genital stage is, when the focus goes back onto the genitals. So the focus now psychologically is establishing an intimate relationship with another being, the possibility of that down the road. There's a big focus that starts at this age range, thinking about that, hopefully for quite a ways down the road. Hey, but certainly those thoughts do seem to be prevalent then. And so, what he's talking about is the genital stage being the one where physically you might be ready to share your sexuality with somebody else. But we now know that there are many other social and emotional skills that should come first too, right? So Freud's psychosexual stages. Now, sometimes students are interested in if they're taking really good notes. And you know that your very first test is coming up. And so this, I just wanted to set your mind at ease. This is an example of good notes from that anal stage. So you might want to pause the slide, compare it with your notes, and if you collected all of this information in your notes, it looks like you're taking really good notes. As long as you study them that thoroughly, you should do really well in the test. Okay? If not, it should give you a good clue of what kind of notes you want to start taking and maybe go back and take. One of the advantages of getting these video lectures is the fact that you can go back and you can pause, that kind of thing. Okay. All right, so moving on to Freud's therapy. Remember him saying to his colleagues, people seem to know things they don't know they know, right? He needs to get at information in the unconscious. And he found the best way to get there was to get the client to talk. The more he could get them talking, the more things leaked out. So things are constantly leaking out of the unconscious. And the best way to deal with this is to get them talking. Now, we're going to look at some other techniques down the road here, but let's look a little further at his therapy. That is how it got this nickname, the talking cure. So the idea here is this is a strategy and therapy of talking with the goal of the client and the therapist receiving insight, right, especially into the unconscious. Now, I want you to imagine, though, what kind of relationship it really takes, like a friendship, you might say, a real trust, a real liking, a real respect between the therapist and the client for this stuff to come leaking out. Okay, so when we are talking about psychoanalysis, we're not talking about a quick form of therapy. There are some much quicker and less expensive forms of therapy, but this certainly is a more pricey one, unfortunately, that is more available to the middle class and over. So this can take a number of years, not unusual for someone to be in psychoanalysis for 2 years or more. Also, like we said, a very close relationship between the client and the therapist. And because of that, there's some special situations with this therapy that can be beneficial, but also can be problems. And that is transference and countertransference, something that can happen in this environment where you have this close relationship. With transference, patients oftentimes will start displaying their feelings for someone who's significant in their life onto the therapist. Okay? Now, a therapist might find this to be really beneficial. In other words, they can work with it. They can kind of play along with it, role play with it, even sometimes, to gain more insight into the unconscious. For instance, they might find out that the person or people in their life who they have the biggest issues with are always males, for instance, or male authority figures, or so on and so forth. So, transference can be used in a positive way in therapy. However, it can also be very negative. So the patient might feel that they're falling in love with the therapist. They can displace feelings they have for someone they're falling in love with or have those kinds of feelings for onto the therapist. And that might or might not hurt the therapy and the relationship there, them feeling that way. And so sometimes people are really surprised to hear that psychoanalysts are in psychoanalysis themselves. They must be in order to keep their licenses. And they often will trade off these services with each other. But what they go to discuss is largely their clients in transference situations and even counter-transference situations, which we will talk about here in a moment. But the idea is that if you are the therapist and you're trying to see whether this will hurt your relationship, it's like being at an art museum and standing directly in front of where your nose is almost touching a great big painting. And you can't see the whole thing, right? You can't see the big picture. Your viewpoint is limited because you are so close to the situation. So the idea is that psychoanalysts are better able to perform this service for each other than for themselves. So an unbiased outside party, right, judging whether the transference is something that is positive in helping the therapy, or if it's negative, and what that therapist needs to do is actually refer that client to another therapist because the transference is hurting the relationship. Now, the same goes for countertransference. And in the same way, the therapist can develop feelings for the client. It might be that, they get tired of hearing the clients talk about their problems and they are losing empathy. Really important then to move that client on to another therapist, refer them on to another one. This really needs to be close and genuine relationship. And therapists also can transfer feelings from another important person in their life onto the client. And again, another therapist is the best one to judge this.